And I put my microphone on.
There you go.
One request from Kim is to be sure that you pull the microphone close to you and speak loudly, because at our last meeting, there were a few salient points that weren't captured. So, Bibi just turned on the recorder. So the meeting is, we're calling the meeting to order. Again, very much appreciate everyone's attendance. I think the first item on the agenda was the approval and review of the May minutes, so which were taken by Kim. She graciously documented the meetings from the recordings, and it's just the highlights. And I wanted to thank Erica for taking notes for for tonight's meeting. I appreciate it very much. Have the committee members had an opportunity to review the minutes from our last meeting? And is there any discussion at this juncture?
No.
Then I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Did you capture that, Erica? Woody? Thank you. Okay, appreciate that very much. The next item on the agenda is just to clarify our meeting schedule. Whipple Hall is in great demand, and the Board of Selectmen actually changed their meeting date and time seasonally. So that requires us to think through our meeting schedule so that we don't have to think about is it Tuesday or is it Thursday. So I had proposed, and I didn't receive any feedback from this on the committee, that we typically meet on the third Thursday of each month, with the exception of August and December, where we will not meet. And we'll meet here at 5 p.m. Any discussion or considerations in regard to that? I did get a message from John Boughton, who said that he's having some challenges attending our meetings with his other professional and family commitments. And he had suggested that he be an alternate. I stated that we have two alternates and that he will have to make a decision about his continued participation. I did not hear back from him. So I don't believe that this vote is required if there's a consensus on when we meet. Is that? I don't think so. Yeah, okay. And then on the minutes, again, these are administrative matters, but on the minutes, we will have a minute taker based on the alpha order of the last name. And I appreciate everyone's cooperation on that. And they will be posted on the town website. For the audience's information, the minutes from our last meeting in the agenda are posted on the town website under the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. So please make reference to that. The chair will facilitate the meeting discussions. In the absence of the chair, it'll be the vice chair. That's all straightforward. I did want to just remind folks, because I did ask for clarification on this point from Kim and Bibi, and that in terms of meetings outside this group, you're welcome to meet with any town representatives, members of the public that you wish. But if a number of committee members meet, if it exceeds a quorum of 4 people, then there must be advance notice of the meeting, and it must be posted on the town site.
Russ, is that exceeds or is quorum or higher?
The quorum is 4.
So if there are 4
or more people.
It needs to be a public meeting.
Yes,
Right.
it has to be posted publicly in advance for the public's possible participation. So just those are points of clarification. And before we get into the heart of the agenda, which is really to talk about the new London sidewalks and the work that the Public Works Department has been doing and continues to do, I have a few relevant, hopefully, updates for you. I'm working with Kim on the website for our committee, And I hope to have, with her assistance, a list of resources on biking and walking safety and access that will be accessible to the public. And I will prepare a draft of those resources. And it will be distributed. The draft will be distributed to committee members before its posting. Many of you are avid cyclists or walkers or both, and you have many other connections to the community, so I would appreciate your assistance in posting that information. As a follow-up to our last meeting, Ed had made a request, which I thought was very admirable or very useful, and that was, could we get a digital GIS inventory of the sidewalks in town, both their length and the composition of the sidewalks? And it sounded like a fairly simple, straightforward request. But what I found out is, and I can be corrected, Bob, but that doesn't exist in digital form, although I know Bob knows every foot of the sidewalks. And Adam Ricker, our town planner, has made a request of the Lake Sunapee Upper Valley Regional Planning Council to prepare such a GIS map. I just want to clarify something, that the map will be just an inventory of what exists. The map will not do any kind of rating of the conditions of the sidewalk in its first iteration. So the first step in that process is called a scope, which is a written description of what the town is requesting in terms of services, which will need to be approved by Kim. The estimate in terms of this work being done is approximately $300 to $500. And I did get an update from Austin Ford from the Regional Planning Commission that this could possibly be done by our September meeting, the third week of September. I will keep all committee members posted on the progress of that, but I think that would be a useful tool, and I thank Ed for making that suggestion. Tonight, we have Bob Harrington here, and I believe Sam is on vacation. Is that correct? That's the notice I got. And I think he's on vacation from his previous position, not on vacation from his pending position. I do want to thank Bob for the collaborative work that I've done with him on increasing bike and pedestrian safety, and I could give you many examples of that and stories, but I'm sure that people want to keep the meeting relatively brief. But I can say that in terms of the bike racks, Bob really took the initiative to help with the siting of the bike racks in public locations. He worked very closely with the library director in terms of the siting of their bike racks. He was gracious when the truck showed up on a date it was not supposed to show up to have the bike racks unloaded. So that's just indicative of his approach in terms of working with us. I do also want to just mention two very quick items. One, Grant Smith had made a request that off-road trails be added to our agenda in terms of planning, biking, and walking activities in town. And he had planned to invite a stalwart group of young parents and children that compose the Pleasant Lake Peddlers, and it is a group to be reckoned with, I'll say that. Because I've had the pleasure of biking with them. So Grant has graciously agreed to have that as an agenda item for our September meeting. And we will hopefully invite some other stakeholders, including the Conservation Commission and other people who might be helpful in that discussion. So again, thank you, Grant. Appreciate that. And lastly, I just want to remind people of the Hospital Days Parade and activities. The 98th Annual Hospital Days is August 1 through the 3rd. The Bike Walk Coalition, which is a separate nonprofit charitable organization, will be having a parade contingent promoting safe biking and walking, and we also have an information table. If committee members would like to participate with their friends or family, please let me know. So without further ado, I think I'll ask Bob to briefly review discussions we've had to date. You may want to start with any additional information you have about the water replacement project in terms of its status and projected completion. But then we do want to talk, I did share with committee members some notes from a meeting you and I had previously in May. And I know there is concern both on the committee's part and on the public's part in terms of the condition of the sidewalks. And I will, if the committee doesn't object, I will also ask members of the public who are here in the audience to participate in this particular discussion. We often have public comment at the end, but just since that's the main topic, I would invite you to participate if you so wish. So if we could start with the water replacement line project, any additional information you may or may not have. I know that that is under the purview of the water district, not Public Works, but maybe you could just share with us sort of progress to date. Thank you, Bob.
So far, they're moving right along. They're ahead of schedule is what I'm hearing. The temporary main went up fairly quick on the other section down here. They still got to do tap-ins to property owners. I don't believe they have as many sprinkler hookups down that end, so it should go fairly quick. That being said, I'm sure everybody's heard this. We've mentioned it time and time again about when they finish the project. We've got to sit tight for a year from the finish date because they're bonding the project. If there's an issue with it, they're responsible for it. The town does not want to own it, so we're going to wait. Sam is well aware of what's going on. Russ met with myself and Sam. As far as planning for that, I won't be around to assist with that, but Sam is very knowledgeable on what's going on. I guess the other thing I can touch base on is I gave Russ a list.
Before we get to the list,
Okay.
I would like to have some additional discussion just on the water main project.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that it's our understanding, and we'd appreciate any clarification, that if the existing sidewalks are disturbed or changed in any manner as a result of the water main construction, that the obligation of the water district is to ensure that they are brought back to their existing condition. They will not be, improving or rebuilding sidewalks at this juncture. But I just wanted that clarification. Thanks.
No, that isn't going to happen, mainly because the effect that they're going to have, there might be a few spots down the other end where they might get close to the curb. The machines get into the curbs, bust the asphalt up, they got to put it back together. And then any laterals, which is hooking into property owners' sprinkler systems and domestic water. So every time you have one of those crosses, they're responsible for that section. Doesn't make sense for us to go in and repair little pieces, bits and pieces, obviously. So that's kind of where we're at with that.
Excuse me. Do committee members or members of the public at this juncture have additional questions or clarifications regarding the water line project?
Just, if I could, related to your question, it does seem like it's just small pieces, as you described it, that the precinct, that the water district has responsibility for repairing, if you will, which doesn't sound like a lot, but I was just wondering if there's a budget for that they have, which could perhaps be deferred and used toward the sidewalk project later, that's all.
For upgrading the sections they disturb, is that?
Yeah, instead of, it's maybe a silly idea, but instead of bringing them back to the condition they were in previously, which is not great, I assume, could that be deferred and whatever sum they might have spent on that be made available so that when other sidewalk work is done in that area, it could be
The
applied?
last conversation we had with the water department is they didn't want to get into the sidewalk business. Obviously, it would affect the cost for the construction company that SUR has already bid upon. This would increase their cost. They have other projects that they're going to be working on when they get this done. That's their plan, as far as I know. And the other thing we don't want to do is obviously raise a section of curb, so it's to code, which is like a 7 to 9 inch reveal, and then over here you got 3 inches. So there'd be issues with plows, there'd be issues with us trying to snow blow, trying to get through there with this piece of granite sticking up. So it creates a lot of issues. It's better off just to wait and do it all at one time, a section. That way it doesn't damage the equipment that we use for that project, to snow blow it.
And just for clarification, Bob, you made reference to this, but basically there's going to be extensive testing of the water line over the course of the next 18 months. And therefore, there won't be this formal handoff, I guess, in terms of who's responsible for the integrity of the water line and its continued operation
That's correct.
until the town is assured that the work is done in such a manner that there aren't any pending issues with the water line. Is
Correct.
that, is that
And there-
correct?
There could be a leak that shows up a few months from now. Right at the year mark, there could be one, which means then they got to go back in and excavate and disturb it again. And if that's the case, that section's probably going to have to wait again. You just don't know. Hopefully, that isn't going to be the case. I'd rather not see that. I think it'd be best if we could just move along and get this thing rolling. I will say this, that it's not easy for us to maintain what's there. I've put it off for 3 years. We did look at doing this. We appropriated money. Now there's not enough money there, so we're going to have to readdress it. In the process of doing this, I didn't realize that the water department was looking at doing this water main project. So that kind of messed our plans up, but once we found out, we just said, okay, step back.
So the next item on the agenda is really kind of exploring what possible options we may have in the short term in terms of improving the sidewalks. And based on my meeting with you and discussions with Sam, it seems clear that we really need kind of a 2-year window before even really thinking about major reconstruction or rehabilitation of the sidewalks on Main Street. Is that your assessment?
Yes. I think one of the things we could be working on is planning. There might be, get an engineer involved and actually do something from, I call it Holman's Corner, which is 114 Main and Newport Road. From there to Cougar Court was what we were proposing to do upgrades to, but it might be wise to actually maybe try to get the Upper Valley involved in planning and help us assist to come up with some sort of a beautification at the same time. I know Sam, you and I and Sam actually had a conversation about maybe the possibilities for that. I would say that I would not recommend trying to install more sidewalks until we address that side, and then this side going towards the Catholic Church. Those two are probably the worst, and unfortunately, by the time you get those done, probably the center section is going to be needing upgrades as well. So I'm not sure. I guess I'd be looking, or Sam would be looking for the committee's recommendations. Maybe it makes sense to come right up to Seamans Road, or, just get it all done in one project.
Well, this is open for discussion at this point in terms of the committee's deliberations on this matter. I did share with the committee some of the notes from our previous meeting, and I do want to just reiterate that based on our discussions, that we certainly need a sort of bicycle and pedestrian master plan that is a further iteration of our overall town master plan, and that's basically the planning document many other towns and municipalities have used. And we can take steps to sort of incorporate community input and discussion into the creation of that master plan. And that's more of that's not a short-term kind of effort, that's more of a like 3 to 4 year kind of effort. But the question for you, not to put you on the spot, is are there, given that the central feature of the town is Main Street, and we cannot tackle anything short-term with that. We talked about several other segments that we might be able to make some improvements on that would give the public some confidence that we in fact are squarely tackling the issue of improving biking and walk safety in town on a more short-term basis. And also maybe a demonstration project of how motor vehicles, pedestrians and bicyclists can coexist on a roadway. And we actually talked through very specifically several different segments. Some of those are incorporated into the downtown business bike walk loop, which I've shared information about that with the committee. And the concept of the downtown business bike walk loop has been reviewed and approved by town committees, including the Board of Selectmen. But we do not have an exact route for that, nor do we have funding for it. But I will be sure to include in our resources for the town website the mapping of this downtown business bike loop. So, again, I want to hear from other committee members, but one of the specific segments that we discussed was the rotary to Little Sunapee Road on County Road that goes by Hilltop, and that's a segment that has a significant amount of bicycle and pedestrian traffic, and in terms of the physical infrastructure of that segment, it may be conducive to widening the road or making some other kind of accommodations for people. Again, the rationale for that is to sort of communicate to the public that we're being proactive in the short term in terms of thinking through reducing the hazards for pedestrians and cyclists. Obviously, that's only one very small segment, but I guess the question is, if Public Works had the budget for making additional modifications to that segment and the budget for maintaining whatever would be required based on those modifications, is that something that would be feasible?
As far as the money's coming out of the operating budget, I'd say that's a big no. As far as planning for it, that's definitely something that can happen. It's just a matter of going through the budget process. Maintenance, the issue I have there is where pretty taxed right now as far as trying to get these sidewalks maintained. The guys do a fantastic job. This past winter, they actually were blessed with less snowstorms of significant amounts until the end of the year, and we struggled with those. The issue I have right now is we have one machine that has a dump body on the back of it with a drop spreader, which gives us the opportunity to cover a long distance for treating them, because it's not only snow blowing them. So what we look at is how are we going to treat those when we're done, and how long will it take? We do have another piece of equipment we put on. It's just a broadcast spreader that's almost similar to a farm tractor having a manure spreader on the back. Not the ultimate choice for maintaining. It spreads it too wide. They don't go as far as the other sidewalk machines, so at some point we need to address that. We had several complaints from Elkins that we're not getting there soon enough, so we have to get down there as well. Usually it takes 2-3 days. Sometimes we can get down there in a day, but we allow at least 3 days to get down there and try to do it. So as far as a sidewalk, I'd say budget process, which might be a little taxing at this point, but I'm not saying it's impossible. It would probably require Sam to get some numbers together. I don't think I'd have the time to do it right now for the budget, but he'd have to work on that. He is going to be new.
Yeah.
He's got a lot to learn, so I hate to put too much on his shoulders.
I understand that. Sure. Yeah.
And that would be totally up to him. Maybe he feels comfortable with that, taking that on, but I can't speak for him.
Right. Now, just referring to our meeting, and I understand and appreciate no commitments were made in our discussion. We were it was exploratory in nature. But we did talk about County Road, we talked about Gould Road, we talked about Seamans Road, County Road to the Colonial Building, and Main Street, of course, which I understand we're not going to be tackling that segment. I understand that Sam obviously will be charged with trying to figure out sort of next steps, and we need to be aware of capacity questions. That's why I preface my question with, if you had the personnel and equipment that was budgeted, we had the funding source, could one of these segments be done in a relatively short time frame, whatever that is?
Yeah, I would say that's more a question for Sam.
Yeah. Okay.
Last thing I want to do is put him on the spot,
Yeah,
and then
I
you guys say,
Yeah.
Bob said.
Right. Yeah, I understand that completely, and we'll certainly,
Now, another
we'll be certainly
section,
discussing these.
you didn't mention from Parkside up to the hospital either.
That's a segment that you and I did discuss with the construction of the Twin Pines housing, excuse me. With the construction of the Twin Pines housing project and the assisted living facility that's going to be next to the hospital, there will be increased pedestrian and bike traffic down there, increased density, population density. I think that is going to require very careful orchestration and planning with those entities in order to move ahead with the sidewalk project there, from my understanding. You can
Now,
certainly clarify.
Continuum is supposed to add on a section from the outing club. It's supposed to come down the same side of the road that the existing sidewalk is. I can't remember exactly, it's been so long now, but it's at least a couple 100 feet, give or take. Then they're going to put a crosswalk in, jump it across, and go all the way down to Lion Brook. And that's where their section on their dime is going to end. So the other section that at some point that I think is on that list I gave you would be from Lion Brook up around the corner to the hospital. But however, Continuum is actually going to have a series of sidewalks going through their facility too. So you will be able to actually loop around. It's just going to go a different way, but for those that like to walk, it might not be a bad thing, because it's gonna zig and zag through there, but it is gonna be a safe way to travel as far as getting up to the roundabout, so something to think about.
Okay, I want to open up for some further discussion in terms of either immediate sidewalk projects, about sort of planning for the Main Street enterprise, which will be fairly extensive, or any other items. BB, do you want to add anything? Okay.
Taking lots of notes and listening.
Thank you. Don?
Express, it all comes down to budget. And can you just give us a background guess at the cost of installation per linear foot of sidewalk with 7 to 9 inch above grade, the width, and then the cost of maintenance, just to give us some idea of the scope of the cost of these proposed projects? And in today's dollars, who knows what's going to happen by the time we actually get around to it, and I appreciate that. But from what I see in your discussions, they're wonderful ideas, but I have no idea of the cost of this. I'm sure you know exactly the cost of maintenance, what's existing, but if we were to put in something new, what sort of budget are we looking at?
I don't have an exact number on the maintenance end. Once the sidewalk's established, there isn't, everybody thinks maintenance is fix the curb, fix the pavement, and so on and so forth, but my concern is after it's in, you have a maintenance of winter maintenance and then spring maintenance. Any sand or anything that might end up on there from plowing, we've got to get it back off for safe pedestrian travel. And then we sweep the edge of the road, as you've seen us do through Main Street, probably more than once. On the town roads, the maintenance is a little bit more involved because we use sand on our roads, so that's a little bit more to pick up, takes a little bit more time. It involves, laborers going out to sweep the stuff off, whether it be by hand or if we can put our sidewalk machine that has a broom on it to brush them off. If they're between 4 and 5 feet wide, it's like the perfect scenario. If there's no telephone poles, which obviously isn't what Main Street is, it makes maintenance so much easier. It's just quick. We can just zip right along. We don't have to sweep around telephone poles to make it look nice. We could go around them, but I refuse to do that. It should look good when we get done. I think they do a great job on Main Street. They really get done sweeping them nooks and crannies and make it look good. But as far as the maintenance, that fluctuates depending on the winter. This winter, our winter sand and salt's down because we didn't have as many storms. You may think that a 3-foot snowstorm is more maintenance than a 1 inch. That's not the case. It still involves the same amount of wear and tear, the same amount of sand, the same amount of cleanup in the spring. So it all depends on storms. Right now we have roughly about, I think it's just over 6 miles of sidewalks, last time I measured. So what I look at is how long does it take them to go from one end of town to the other. I mean, we split it up and try to get what we call main lines where the businesses are located and there's a lot more foot traffic. So we concentrate on that first and then go from there. So it involves on Main Street a little bit more back and forth as the state trucks go by, fill it in right behind us. I'm sure everybody here has that happen on their driveways, even with us. And I apologize for that, but I have no control over that. But that dictates, if the state can't get out there, if it's on a state road, there's going to be a lot more man hours. So it's really hard to put a number on that.
Well, Bob, that's great insight in sharing all of that. Just just the number of 6 miles to maintain right now, when you look at the numbers that you and Russ discussed, that triples that linear footage. So whatever the cost is of maintaining what we have in existence, we're looking at, aside from the construction fees,
Right.
3 times that number if you're going to increase that. So just, again, it's wonderful to talk about these projects,
Yeah,
but I
and-
have no concept.
A lot of people don't realize that, like on Main Street, we're probably I'm gonna just throw a number, I haven't really measured it, actually I did once, but I don't remember the number, but it's right around probably 24 feet in some areas wide. So just picture a 6-inch snowstorm, and the state comes through and plows that. It all goes over on that sidewalk. So every 6 inches stacked up is on that sidewalk. Our machines can't just go through that when they're done. We have to keep up with it, otherwise we struggle to go through it, and that's when we get a lot of breakdowns and such. So, at some point, we are gonna have to look at a different machine. We have one now. As we add on, they were 200,000, now they're probably 250,000 to buy the same setup we have. That's the issue we face right now, is prices on things are ridiculous. Granite's gone up, so I don't even know what the price of that is now, because it kept fluctuating.
So we're encouraging global warming to reduce all of this work.
Yeah.
Thanks, Don. So I guess the only comment I would make is that if we did have American Disabilities Act compliant sidewalks that increased accessibility for everyone, and they were the appropriate width and grade and elevation, you would need equipment that would be appropriate for maintaining that type of sidewalk. And I have to assume that since many other communities have those types of sidewalks, that there is, equipment has evolved to maintain those types of sidewalks. Is that correct?
Yeah, we started out with just a farm tractor, pretty much. We still have one farm tractor that we use today that really isn't designed for those. The other unit we have, it's called a multi-hog, and there's several companies out there, but the snow blower, and I don't remember if you got a chance to look at it when you were down the shop that one day, but if anybody wants to look at it, you're more than welcome to come down. It's a beast. You've probably heard it going through. It's very loud, but it moves snow. That's what it's meant to do. They actually used them on airports. They're a high-speed machine if you want to do it that way. I wouldn't, because if you hit something, you're going to go through the windshield. But these guys go nice and easy. It's slow going, but definitely the best piece of equipment to use for that, because it'll move a lot more snow than these little farm tractors.
Bob, I just have a quick question. Is there a seasonal option where sidewalks don't have to be maintained in the winter? We're talking about expanding sidewalks, which have currently not been in existence, so they weren't an option for winter travel for, by foot. Is there, can we just make some, 3-season sidewalks and they're not maintained in the winter, or what are the regulations on sidewalks?
Yeah, I'm not sure on the rules on that, the laws. I would think that there's probably gray areas, like if you were to use it as a bike path, you might be able to get away with not maintaining it in the wintertime. That definitely would be very helpful for us, because if we get too much out there, then we got to bring in more personnel as well. So right now we got 2. As you expand, the first step I would recommend would be to upgrade the equipment, because it does the job a little faster, more efficiently. Then at some point, they'd probably have to add another person.
Yeah, just because I know like the outing club is closed in the wintertime. I could certainly see the demand for the Twin Pines apartment buildings for people to be able to walk to the Rotary outside, the hospital, Hannaford's. But aside from that, I mean, adding these sidewalks become more of a luxury and not a necessity. Maybe, obviously the sidewalks we have now are a necessity in Main Street and the businesses and such, but if we consider that as maybe a seasonal option, that would certainly cut down the cost other than the construction, which we, need to nail down too, but.
Yeah, I'd say I'd probably have to check into the laws a little bit on that and see, and maybe Kim can shed some light on that as well, but I do have a book I can look into. I don't remember seeing anything about seasonal in that, but that doesn't mean it's not possible.
Yeah, I think from a liability perspective, you'd have to have a gate that closed and signs that said, it's not,
Now,
it's not passable, in winter months or whatever, something like that.
Yeah,
Just for liability.
another option on those as far as the off-road, if it comes to that, I mean, we don't have to maintain them as far as plowing them right off the bat. We were allowed, I don't know if you've gone through the city of Concord, it's weeks before they get their sidewalks. They just have so many. So there is an option there. If you get back-to-back snowstorms, that ends up getting a little difficult to get in there. But if they're made, if the bike paths were made wide enough to run a plow truck down, like a pickup truck, that's an option. That's one way to clean them. So that's not out of the question. That's one alternative.
I've got a couple questions about our existing sidewalks, and I'm trying to learn. Is there anything before we do Main Street that can be done or that's planned to be done to existing sidewalks, be it curbs or surfaces? And I think I am really thinking about Pleasant Street from the bank down towards the old post office towards Gould Road. There's surface there in the curb. That must be a nightmare to clean in the wintertime.
There is a sidewalk out there that is not ours.
Who owns that then? Adjacent to the bank? Well, you take care of it. So
There's the section right beside the bank we do.
Yeah.
And that one's a nightmare for us right now because the building is right there.
Okay. How about the next section once you break
The
past
next
their
section on the right,
Yes.
I'd have to look at it, but there's a section in there that is actually not the town's. Somewhere there it crosses.
Before
That section might be ours to Gould Road, I think.
Yeah.
Then it crosses over, and then there's another one that goes down by Lion Brook.
Right. I'm
That
thinking
is
really
not ours.
between Gould Road and Main Street, that section,
Yep.
the curb and the surface must be a nightmare to repair. I don't know if that's held up by the water department, but if we own that, could that be put in a schedule for some repairs?
It wouldn't be held up. We don't have the money for it. We didn't.
If the money, okay, so
We didn't-
assuming adequate money is available.
It probably could be done. That is one that I probably have on the list for
Yeah.
upgrades, I think. I listed a bunch.
Within the center of town, other than Main Street, that seems to be
Yeah.
one of the hardest sections probably to maintain in the wintertime.
Yeah, I know the section by the bank, that one was done about the same time
Yes.
as the other section there, but there is one other section. It'd be nice to have it wider. I don't know how much property we can
Yeah.
encroach on.
What's the right of way?
I'd have to look into that, but, the other issue we have is telephone poles end up, you gotta get around them, and
Do the poles need to be where they are? Could they be encouraged as new poles are placed to put them on the other side of what you're going to need for a right of way?
it's almost an act of Congress.
I thought so.
I know we tried to have a pole moved on Parkside,
I remember that.
and it stood there
Months.
with nothing on it but communication lines for months. Eversource did what they had to do, and they actually put another pole in. So it's not really Eversource holding us up, it's communication lines. And if it's I hate to point the finger, but if it's Comcast, it's gonna be there a while.
We have, yes, yeah.
So we deal with them all the time, so.
Is it too early to plan for Main Street, to do engineering and to let people know
I don't-
where right-of-ways may be, so they don't put a new pole someplace?
Yeah, I
with
talked to
stone-
Kim on the money that was appropriated for starting at Holman's Corner, coming up to Cougar. That has to be used for that section, because that's the way it was worded. But according to her, she thinks that we could start using some of that money and just say, hey, we need more.
Yeah, I'm
So-
thinking for Sam, it would be great if, when the water main project is done, that whatever sections of Main Street funding's available for,
Have it ready to
the
go.
engineering and the planning has been done, so that that's not a holdup. Be it a small section at once, or just chewing away all the way up towards the college. Where's the section from the college to the Catholic Church? Is that going to be impacted at some point by water?
Yeah, that's on that list. Those are the two that I think
Could be done.
should be addressed. This one's a nightmare out here for us to maintain. It's only about, I don't even think it's 3 foot wide. I think it's
Yeah.
like 2'8" or something like that. It's very narrow, it's concrete. They do not make a machine unless you want to take out your walk-behind snowblower and head towards the church. So the problem we end up with is a lot of ice building up. It needs to be elevated above lawns, and then you just slope the lawn down. That way we don't dig into lawns and whatnot. It just makes it that much easier to maintain. But that one is very narrow.
What does the ideal sidewalk look like to you, in the ideal or realistic sidewalk for Main Street?
I believe 4 foot is the width that you are supposed to have, but ideally, I think 5. It gives you a lot more room to maneuver. You're not going to always get a 5-footer in, mainly because of poles. You know, there's a lot of obstacles in the way, but if you're building one, for instance, up on County Road above Hilltop, there's no reason why we couldn't sneak one in. I measured the asphalt up there, and I want to say it's like 22 to 23 feet wide there. So there's room enough with the existing road without impacting the road. And actually, to be honest with you, I think it's worth it to narrow that down a little bit, because it makes the traffic slow down.
Slows you down.
So I'm a firm believer in that, keeping them narrow.
I did notice that with the water project, when they were parking the excavator in front of the bank, it prevents people from turning to the right and cheating there.
I complained about that.
Well, maybe a lower barrier that you can see around, but
I witnessed cars coming down the road trying to maneuver that corner, and there's cars trying to come out.
Yep.
And traffic was stopped on Main Street, along with everything else they got going on at that. So I made a phone
Nightmare.
call to Rob Thorpe and said, could you speak to him about that? And then also there was some trip hazards down on the other end by Holman's Corner I mentioned to him as well, so.
Thanks for your comments, Ed. But in terms of the right-of-way, does the town have the legal authority to create 4 or 5-foot sidewalks? Do we have the right-of-way for that kind of, I mean, you're saying that's ideal, but in fact, do we have that right-of-way?
That would not be up to me. That would probably be more the select board to make that decision. I believe you're talking about eminent domain. Sometimes you start getting into that, and you're going to end up with more angry people losing the front of their lawn or their stone wall. We do have a stone wall that's up right there just before Spring Ledge, and that is extremely narrow. We've actually had rocks get stuck in the snowblower because of that section there. So I'm not sure what we would end up doing on that. Hopefully they'd be fine with it being moved back when we get to that point.
Other comments from committee members? We haven't heard from a few people.
I want to be sure I understand the numbers. As an illustration, Main Street, in the notes that you had written, Russ, the 5th possible project was Main Street, Hayes Road to Holman's Corner, approximately 20,700 feet. Is that a linear 20,000, what is the?
Yeah,
is that-
that's just a linear
So
foot.
that's almost,
Just a ballpark, I
so
just
it's almost
did-
4 miles, that distance, is that right?
What's that?
So 20,700 feet.
No, that must be a typo. It wouldn't be 20,000, probably 2,000 something.
Probably 2,000.
Yeah.
Well, then County Road to Colonial Building, approximately 17,400 feet, so that's roughly 3 miles? Is that what that's saying?
What section was that?
Sorry, Russ, it's the fourth item, County Road to Colonial Building, approximately 17,400. I would pick any of these, Seamans Road, Cottage Lane to Kelsey Field, approximately 17,500 feet. That's 3 miles, which doesn't seem right.
1,750.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's a few typos there.
It's a decimal point thing. I took notes of the meeting. I thought that's what Bob said, but I think he actually meant.
Yeah, so it's intended to be linear feet.
Yeah,
in
because
each
Kelsey
case.
Field
Okay.
would be probably way less than a quarter mile
Yeah,
anyway.
I think so. Yeah, okay.
That is
So probably 965 feet, something like that.
important
Okay.
clarification.
Thank you.
And I'm happy if I have time, if any of you just wanted to just go out, if you had questions as far as that list, where they are, if you needed to take a ride and just look at it, I'm happy to do that. That's,
Well,
Not a big
maybe I'm
deal.
naive, but I'm hoping that the reference to getting a GIS map will help. Will that give us a greater clarification of where everything is located? It was helpful to hear that Holman Corner is as you described, because it's on the map, it's sometimes Holman Road or whatever it might be. So some of that could be useful to understand.
yeah, you could go on the GIS map yourself and even see that.
Okay,
If you can get onto Street View, it's actually a little bit more convenient, because you can see obstacles too. But what I was looking at there was going right down that whole left-hand side towards Holman's Corner, all the way past the Barn Playhouse, and it's
Right.
mainly because I see many times where people are walking on that left-hand side when there's a perfectly good sidewalk
Right.
on the other side. Don't ask me why, but that's what they do, and then they get to that corner, and that's not a good place to be on that corner.
yeah, not safe. Just so, yeah, Main Street has sidewalks seemingly alternating from one side to the other. Am I right on that? Certain places, sometimes it's on one side, sometimes on the other.
Yeah,
If you take the whole length of it.
we're on one side of the road up here, which probably doesn't make sense to put two up there.
Right.
But we have double sidewalks going down all the way from this corner. Actually, there's a short stretch here that the town does not own. I think it's just before Little Brothers Burger. It's paved, but they have cobblestones underneath it, or bricks, I can't remember which, but, and it's way too narrow, and there's a tree in the way, so we don't maintain that. We've been asked to maintain it several times, but it needs to be widened out. But if you go from roughly Little Brothers all the way to Holman's Lane, I think it is. What, no, actually all the way to Parkside. The one from Holman's Lane needs to be upgraded at some point, probably. But that's a double sidewalk on both sides all the way
Right.
down. So what I was looking at is, at some point, probably both sides of the road should be done. We're getting a lot more foot traffic for the barn.
Right.
A lot more since they increased their hours, so to speak.
Yeah.
And that just makes sense to me. And with them being on that side of the road, they can pop down Pearl Street, Hayes Road, whatever, and come back around up Barrett Road. It's a nice little walk down through there.
Got it.
So in regard to the capital reserve fund, which keeps kind of bubbling up as a topic, is it your understanding that those funds, it's $130,000, I believe, those funds could be used for either rehabilitation or renovation of an existing sidewalk, or possibly for construction of a new sidewalk, or is it your understanding there are further restrictions on that money?
The capital improvement, if I remember right, I only have specific upgrades listed. There's no new sidewalks in there. And I felt that it would be unnecessary, because who knows how long we're gonna be going out there, to actually put a line in there for new sidewalks, when it's more important to address the existing.
So I did talk to Kim very briefly before our meeting, and I asked for clarification on the use of the capital reserve funds for sidewalks. And she didn't give a definitive answer, but she said that there are certain projects that are tagged, which means that they're for a very specific segment of sidewalk, but not all the funds. The projects that are tagged not necessarily comprise all the funds. And secondly, that if we were going to have the capital reserve fund purpose amended, that it was her understanding that it would have to go not just before the Board of Selectmen, but before the town committee. So that could be,
Right. I think you mentioned it earlier. I think there's an approximate balance of around 250,000, but 120 of it was expended, quote unquote, voted on at the town meeting 2 years ago, I think, specific, maybe even 3.
Almost 4.
Almost 4.
It's been,
Specifically for what you said, Home and Lane to Cougar Court. So that money has to be, because the voters voted on it, and it's just sitting there. But the rest of that money, I don't believe has been expended, but the purpose of the fund, that's what we have to take a closer look at. If it specifically says this money is just for, maintenance or upgrade or whatever it is, then that's where the sticky wicket is.
right, yeah. So, for example, if the next step in terms of the Main Street project is extensive planning and engineering studies to figure out the best way forward, the best methodology forward, the capital reserve funds could not be used for that purpose. Is that correct?
That's probably what Kim said, got to look deeper into, but I just took that note.
Okay.
the one thing to think about too is sometimes there's grant opportunities out there, so it would be kind of nice to go into this with some sort of a plan. So you have something on paper. If you have something completely ready, dig ready, it's a lot easier to get a grant. That kind of puts you higher on the list. So that's something to think about, and the Upper Valley, I'm sure, would assist with a lot of that too.
I think, I just had a quick question. I live right next to Pleasant Lake, and especially this time of year with so much foot traffic around the lake, you often get groups of people that are walking like 4 people wide. And, you're coming around the corner and all of a sudden there's 4 people, wide coming at you, the other opposite way down the road. Obviously we can't put a sidewalk around that or anything, but is there a way that maybe we could put like a painted line around the lake or something, just to give a suggestion that maybe people should stay on the side of the road? It seems like they're playing chicken with cars half the time, and it just doesn't seem safe at all. Oftentimes you get 4 people wide coming both ways. There's cars going both ways. It just seems like inevitably, and I'm surprised it hasn't happened yet, that there's not more accidents there with pedestrians. They don't move. They don't get out of the way.
Yeah.
So.
Bunker Road, I'd probably say no. It's so narrow. Around the back of the lake perhaps, but we're going to have to put in a special type of line so you hand out shock collars, because they will cross that. I've seen it. I mean, they don't even use our crosswalks in town half the time. That's why some of them have been removed. The state actually, and I didn't agree with them at the time, they said there's no need for one here, people won't use it. And kind of opened my eyes. I started looking, I'm like, what do you mean they won't use it? And Russ and I had this conversation. And after they said that, I paid a little bit more attention, and he was absolutely right. The sidewalk, I've seen more people in front of Subway. Sidewalks right there, there's actually 2 pretty close right there. One of them they wanted to take out that was close to the end, and I told them, go talk to Dan Wolf. And that magically stayed. So you'll sit there and watch them. There'll be 2 crosswalks right there, and they'll just go on an angle across because they're gonna go the shortest walk possible.
Yeah, you would just hope, maybe some signage or something just to remind pedestrians to stay to the side. It's a real safety hazard, I think.
We have the same issue. I live in Sutton, and a lot of people have migrated over to walk around Keys Lake, and they do the same thing there. And they'll look right at you, they will not move. I've actually said something to them, politely ask them to, could you move to the side of the road, and you get a snark remark back. So I honestly don't think, I think you could put signs out all day long, spend thousands, and I honestly don't think they're gonna pay attention to them. It's, similar to what happened over by Sunapee Traffic Circle. They had the two bicyclists that got hit over there. I'm sure they were riding side by side, not paying attention. They're putting the responsibility in the operators and not taking it upon themselves to be safe. The best thing, I think, and unfortunately most of the people aren't going to read anything, is if it's in, like on the website or Municipal Matters, but I think a lot of the pedestrians that are walking down there are coming in from other towns too.
Those people aren't from here.
Well, there are,
I think there are signs down at Keyser now that say the law says
Yeah, and they don't pay attention to it. And to be honest with you, I think all the people from Sutton can't walk around the lake anymore, so they're coming over here because there's too much foot traffic, so.
Well, there are steps that can be taken to reduce hazards and reduce risk, and they've been demonstrated. I mean, they've been empirically demonstrated. So there will always be the outliers. There will always be people who don't respect, the regulations. But our responsibility is to try to mitigate the risk as committee members and as public officials. So if there are no further questions, Bob, we really appreciate you coming in, and we look forward to working with Sam, and I may take you up on looking at a few of these segments more closely, and I will invite other committee members to join me if they have an interest in doing that. I know you're you're winding down in terms of your responsibilities and role, so I don't know if we'll be able to schedule that, but I think it would be useful to, on the ground, look at some of the hazards and some of the risk involved in a number of these intersections. And as we do the digital mapping, that's going to give us an opportunity to have an inventory of exactly the linear feet of the sidewalks and the physical characteristics of them. I just want to reiterate that, one of the key questions from the master plan survey was about, quality of life in New London and mobility and, access to walks, to pedestrian paths, to bike paths, was one of the overwhelming concerns of the respondents to the master plan, which is very consistent with the bike walk survey that was done by the New London Bike Walk Coalition. And also there was a survey done by the New London Hospital, a community survey where biking and walking paths were rated as one of the highest concerns of respondents. So I understand you have, obviously there are budget limitations, there's logistical constraints, there are maintenance concerns, but our responsibility is to try to navigate those troubled waters and come up with solutions that the vast majority of the townspeople are requesting that we embrace and come up with creative and effective solutions for.
Now, keep in mind, too, the town did expand sidewalks. I don't have the year. I want to say it was probably about 9 years ago, maybe, 8. We extended the sidewalk going out Seamans Road. It went on the other side of Gould Road down to, I can't think of the name of the road, but, yep. And then we also extended going out Pleasant Street. That was a fairly large section. We extended some on Main Street since I've been here. Coming down, I think it went to out there in front of Dunkin' Donuts by Hayes Road. That section there we added in. And also we upgraded Parkside, which was in dire need of that. That one was a nightmare for us to even maintain. It was so narrow. And then we, trying to think the other section, well, we added some down Elkins. That's a huge amount down there. And I thought
Yeah,
there
I
was
mean,
one.
I certainly appreciate everything Public Works has done.
But that's why I'm
Approved.
saying that, we keep adding. That's a huge section that we added, a large amount compared to what we had. And that's why I push, I'm not saying that we don't want to do them. I'm just saying to keep in mind that down the road, there's going to be budget effects along with adding new. That's the only thing I'm looking at.
I think that, I understand that point completely. I think other committee members do. And I hope that, we can certainly go through a process, whether it's the town budgetary process, whether it's identifying grants or other resources to ensure that we both can change the infrastructure to a more shared road kind of methodology and incorporate all the maintenance concerns and equipment concerns that you have. I think with sort of the post-COVID world, there are many people who were seasonal, who are now full-time residents. There are many more people who are walking and biking on the roads. There's a significant sort of change in our physical environment that it's absolutely essential we address.
It's also an uptick in traffic.
And an uptick in traffic also, yes. So, do other committee members or members of the public have any questions for Bob at this time? Okay, we very much appreciate you participating. Go right ahead.
As so many members of the community, Bob, that you've helped provide wonderful services for, could we as a group take this opportunity to thank Bob for all that he has contributed? So congratulations on just an outstanding job done, Bob. Thanks.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you very much. Okay,
Enjoy your evening.
the next item on the agenda is the bicycle and pedestrian discussion guide, which I sent to the committee members in advance. Just to be clear that this document is not a comprehensive plan that would be a specific iteration from the master plan. The master plan calls for utilizing a complete streets methodology in transportation planning and implementation in town. And complete streets means really weighing the needs and requirements of bicyclists, pedestrians, and motorists in the planning process. So the discussion guide was just an attempt to lay out for town officials kind of a comprehensive overview of where we might be headed in terms of a plan. And the plan kind of envisions an integrated network of our trails. I mean, I think we have 29 miles of conservation trails, bike paths, the downtown business bike loop, and what would that look like in terms of coming to fruition? So there's some mapping involved in that. But other towns, including Lebanon, Hanover, Rochester, Littleton, have very detailed pedestrian and bicycle master plans. And that kind of comprehensive overview is extremely helpful in terms of generating community input and support for the project, but also it's kind of the first iteration of developing more specific shovel-ready engineering plans. So, you know, if you lay out the goals and objectives of a bicycle and pedestrian master plan, there would be benchmarks for, you know, the first year, you know, year 2, year 3, or year 5. So I think that is an arrow we need to put in our quiver in terms of moving forward to have sort of an envisioned destination for where we want to be. And I'd like to just get comments or suggestions on sort of next steps for the master plan. I think it would require more substantive work on the committee's part, and it would also involve a review by the planning board and other town entities so that it could be formally approved as kind of a roadmap moving forward for our work. And obviously, it would be a plan that would have specific action steps and budgetary goals or financial goals in terms of funding. So I just wanted to ask if committee members had a chance to review the discussion guide and have any suggestions in that regard.
I didn't print it. I read it. I didn't print it. He's got it.
I think the important question was raised after last meeting about whether we're going to be an advisory committee or an action committee. And I think, you know, if we're to come up with a master plan and really provide, you know, the steps forward about how it's going to be executed, I think that kind of puts us in the action committee category, which I'm happy to be in. So I just wanted to.
That was very well put.
Nicely done.
Woody,
Nothing substantive to add to it right now. The actual plan, as it's been written or drafted, what is the status of that? I mean, is it in the hands of the select board? Is it still with the Bike Walk Coalition at this point?
So the discussions I've had to date, and I want to make this clear as a representative of the Bike Walk Coalition, not as a representative of this town committee, were with the planning board and the Board of Selectmen. And one of the action steps that I had suggested was the formation of this group. So I will say that through some perseverance and persistence, we were able to bring this group to fruition in terms of its formation. BB played a very important role in expanding the suggestion of having a committee that only focused on sidewalks, and through dialogue and discussion with her fellow Board of Selectmen, myself and others, we have been able to sort of initiate that first step of forming this committee. But the master plan discussion guide was encouraging the planning board and the Board of Selectmen to develop a formal document that was was a further iteration of the master plan. And at this juncture, the planning board and the board of selectmen have not entertained that as a formal step in terms of preparing a bicycle and pedestrian master plan. It's only been at the preliminary discussion level. I don't know if that clarifies things or confuses things.
Is it for us as a committee, or is it for the select board? I mean, it's, this same document, if I understand it correctly, and the process that you went through is also the one that led to conceptual approval of the proposed bike walk loop. Is that correct, or was that a separate?
That was a separate discussion.
Separate
and initiative in terms of the downtown business bike loop. I've given, in my capacity as chair of the Bike Walk Coalition, I've given several presentations to town committees, but the downtown business bike loop proposal and the master plan, bicycle and pedestrian master plan, were separate discussions. Maybe I can clarify by saying that I think that the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board are looking to this committee for taking the next steps in terms of the development of a master plan. Does that seem
I would say that, and
reasonable?
I was not on the I was not a selectman when you presented it before. Emily, were you on the planning board when the?
Not done.
Okay, but yes, I would say that we are looking for all of you that are spending this much time in this that we don't necessarily have the time to spend. So for me, I would appreciate this kind of work because I think it's, and working in conjunction with the planning board, because I think that who owns the master plan, right? Because I think it's really an important part of the future and the growth of the town, this kind of work. So.
Yeah, I do want to clarify that I do not have, transportation engineering expertise, that it is going to be important in terms of this committee's effectiveness that we recruit as volunteers or as consultants, people that have that can be advocates who have certain types of expertise. We don't need to cross that bridge, which I think is the appropriate analogy at this particular juncture, but I think we have to understand that we are passionate and concerned about this issue, and that we're engaging in a process of educating ourselves as we continue to sort of broaden and deepen the work, if that's a fair assessment.
Sure. Just adding to that, I think you had, from prior sessions on the town green at hospital days, the ability to collect information on people who have interest in providing that kind of expertise. I think there were a few names that came about from the last time around, and maybe the same thing can occur this year as well, just to build a portfolio of potential helpers, if you will.
It's a great suggestion, thank you.
I have more questions than actual input, but am I correct in thinking that where the roads, the sidewalks are scheduled to be updated or completed is where we're focusing our bike route on? So all of the places that have been indicated today are going to be. We have to determine what the bike route.
Right. So there is, not to confuse things, but there is an overlap in terms of there are certain segments that I've talked to Bob about that fit into the downtown business bike loop proposal concept. And there were segments that were not part of the proposed downtown business bike loop project. I think the criteria that we need to use are based on the fact that there's been a delay of renovation and rehabilitation of sidewalks due to this impending water project, water line project for several years, i.e., there was funding allocated 3 or 4 years. We now have to ask ourselves the question of, what are the most dangerous intersections as Ed alluded to, what are the street segments that are most problematic and hazardous, and address those initially. I mean, I guess what I would say is the downtown business bike loop is a sound proposal in terms of increasing biking and walking downtown, its safety and its access, but I think it would be remiss of us not to say that there might be critical intersections or segments that really need to be addressed, given that there's been this delay in any kind of new construction for 3 or 4 years, or significant reconstruction of sidewalks, and I think that members of the public also share that concern. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think we have a responsibility to address some immediate concerns as well as to work on a longer range projects.
It seems like because of the unavailability of funding for the sidewalks and the repairs, that what we are tasked to do is to create a long-term complete plan. And so envision the plan that we would think ideal, and then as monies become available year by year, that's when we implement them. So is that, am I again understanding perhaps what the scope of this is?
I think that is a correct.
And then,
I think that is a correct assessment. I would only say that it wouldn't be waiting for funding to be available. I think that we will have to advocate for, and we will have to be very proactive about collaborating with the town to finding funding sources.
If I might add just one last thing, as a follow-up to the off-road biking and walking, I don't know what the opportunities are going to be. You said roads, miles of conservation area that we might, is a conservation area that we might access for biking, and that is going to take, that might be something that we could look at the same time, but separate from the business bike loop, so that we get the support and the funding perhaps for that type of project would be perhaps separate from what we're looking at, is what I'm thinking. So that could be a more
Just for
immediately-
clarification, I'm sorry, are you talking about, when you say conservation areas, are you talking about off-road bike
Yes,
opportunities?
yes.
Okay, thanks
And
for
I
that
also do-
clarification.
Yeah.
So I just had a quick question too, because are we making special consideration for bikes when we're talking about aligning the sidewalk project? Because obviously we can't bike on sidewalks. So are we making these roads a little bit wider, or is there going to be like a bike lane that coexists along with the new sidewalks? We're kind of lumping them together, but we can't bike on the sidewalk. So I was just kind of wanting some clarification as to what differentiation there would be, if any. So I don't know.
Well, I don't have an answer to that question, except to say that if we're going to identify, if we're going to pursue an engineering study for Main Street that balances walking, biking, and motorist, that there will have to be accommodations made for each segment of the population, but I can't say to you that a 4-foot bike lane would be integral to the plan, because I don't have that level of specificity in terms of, Main Street is also a state road. They have very specific requirements. They have all kinds of constraints and regulations, it being a state road, whereas other streets and roadways, the town has quite a bit more discretion in terms of how they design the road and how they accommodate various entities who use the road. So I don't really have a definitive answer for you for that question.
The bike walk loop that's been proposed is a way of avoiding that, avoiding the state road with all of its dangers, and it puts it onto town-controlled roads for the most part, right? So, I mean, that may be the necessary solution. You know, bikes don't have a special path here. We're taking care of pedestrians and auto traffic and getting it through, and truck traffic, and having safe crossings. And much as I'd like to have it on Main Street, as a cyclist, it might be that we can't do much, and so that loop could be the, you know, but it would have to have a lot more attention paid to it to make sure that it is seen that way and used that way.
I mean, I think it is true, and I don't have a lot of empirical information about this, but the amount of money that would be required to reconfigure Main Street in terms of it being like a safe and passable roadway for bikes, pedestrians, and motors, it would be staggering, the amount of money it would take, because there have been so many decisions made along, you know, over the course of decades that really have sort of made it as a motorist-friendly kind of environment. And not that it isn't, it's also hazardous for motorists, but, you know, just how the buildings are, you know, squeezed up against the sidewalk, how there's so many side entrances to Main Street, blind spots for people entering and leaving. It's separate from the issue of the condition of the sidewalks, which is problematic. Just the overall physical infrastructure of Main Street is an extremely challenging kind of environment.
Yeah, I think the more I talk to people that I, you know, ride with and things around town, back to Judith's point, you know, I made the point last meeting that, you know, maybe we move all of this pedestrian and bike traffic to a trail behind Main Street that would be more cost-effective and still incorporate businesses. And maybe in the master plan, you know, there's cross-country skiing in the wintertime, so it'd be a year-round maintained trail where people could get from point A to point B in town without having to go on Main Street, but still be able to access the businesses.
I think that's a discussion that we will have in terms of not just the route, but, you know, the width and the surface, because, you know, it's like a paved trail is about $1 million a mile the last time I looked. So maybe there are options or alternatives to, you know, a paved trail. That's something I think we will have to entertain. We also could have the approach that we're going to develop a route that will have an evolution in terms of it'll be this surface, but, you know, as funding is available, kind of like what they did at Crescente Bog, which is like now they're putting in aluminum elevated walkways, but that's not part of its original, how it was originally designed. So, yeah, good discussion.
I would also like to think that we could find some committee members from other towns that have been successful doing this, and maybe they could come and talk to us about how to start this project and where do we go for information. Yeah. To me, that would be really important. I'd like to hear.
That's an excellent suggestion. We might be able to do like a Zoom call kind of thing. And it might be not in the regular committee meeting, just an opportunity to share ideas with other groups, and particularly, you know, so rural communities, you know, or communities that are kind of at our scale would be particularly valuable as opposed to, you know, Portsmouth, I mean, which has kind of different kinds of challenges than we do. But I think that's a great suggestion. Thank you. Any other points of discussion regarding the bike and pedestrian plan? I think at some juncture in the future, and BB has suggested this, we may decide to have some working groups, not to add another layer of work onto you, but just for people to kind of focus in on a specific kind of problem or set of problems and come back to the group with some recommendations of possible approaches. I think that BB had mentioned that to me, and, you know, sort of the area of work that we have is vast, and it's hard to kind of figure out what are we absolutely going to focus on in terms of priorities. But I do think BB made an excellent suggestion in that regard, and maybe that's something people could be thinking about before our next meeting. I'm reluctant to sort of create formal subcommittees because it's just, there's layers of work and communication and things like that, but I'd like to think of it more like informal working groups that are defined as having like a two-month lifespan or something like that, just to go in depth and with some research and some suggestions of paths forward. So I think that is a tool we have, and then we can also decide whether those working groups have others besides the committee members participating. So I would appreciate people giving that some thought before our next meeting. We'll wind down here pretty quickly, but in terms of private, state, and federal funding resources, I mean, that's a big area. I have done some very superficial kind of investigation in that regard, and this kind of research and investigation is very kind of labor intensive, and the way I am familiar with other types of grant writing, and what you have to understand is, like, you submit 20 grants and you get one. That's just the way it is. And you can use the boilerplate for the grant for many different applications typically. That's what Bob was talking about in terms of like having really detailed shovel-ready plans. You know, most of the federal grants, they're looking at projects that are at least $4 million, and the planning grant has to be $200,000 at least. You do have to have a match from your town, and they have a lot of other stipulations about labor wage rates and employment practices. I'm not going to get into that now, but obviously you have to have well-documented financial and auditing capacity so that they know where their money went. So I think your folks are pretty familiar with that. That's kind of on the macro scale. On the micro scale, there's money available, like, you know, $25,000, $50,000 to get a grant from the Regional Planning Council to do a specific thing. That is more achievable and maybe not so impactful, but that money exists. So I don't think we're going to entertain a deep discussion about this at this meeting, but it would be very helpful if committee members will talk to people they know in organizations or companies or community contacts they have with foundations, just to explore what options might be available to us without being discouraging. I think it would be overly optimistic to think that the town is going to necessarily fund a large infrastructure project, maybe, unless you have information that would invalidate that, which I wished you did have, but I don't think you do. Yeah.
I do want to mention one other thing, though, is for those who may not be aware, the Housing Committee has just obtained a grant of $104,000. It's a housing opportunity grant, planning grant from the state. And with that money, they have retained the services of a consultant out of Plymouth. And they're doing a large study that's going to involve a lot of discovery work at the beginning about where are we going, what is the current population in town, a lot of demographic kind of work, and what is it looking like forward. And then it's going to look at our housing capacity and what things are available for adding on more housing and things like that. It's all, but I think the data from that study will really be beneficial for the work that this committee is going to be doing, right? Kind of what Bob was just talking about and what you were talking about post-COVID. We have a lot more people living here and wanting to take part in outdoor activities and a lot more traffic. So
Right.
just making you all, and Peter Nichols is the chair of that housing committee, and he worked a ton on getting that grant. So I would encourage you to reach out to him.
Yeah, I will.
To get
yes.
feedback on what the process was like for him to get
Right,
that
yes.
grant funding. Yeah.
Right, and Jerry Coogan, who's the town representative to the Upper Valley Lake Sunapee Regional Planning Commission, gave me a list of some possible funding sources, which I will share with you before the next meeting. So, I think we will move forward with the agenda. Is there any other public comment this evening? Go right ahead.
Good evening. My name is Bob Bowers. I'm a resident of New London. First, I want to thank all of you for being on this committee and taking on a very, very extensive project. I come to this with a specific concern in mind. I did a lot of biking in my day, but I'm more interested in sidewalks. I very much support the efforts on the biking routes and various things that need to be done. My concern is that there's such a broad spectrum that you're trying to deal with that sometimes it may become necessary to turn to, as BB and you have talked about, a working group in particular areas. One might be bikes, one might be sidewalks in general, or in my particular concern, one might be sidewalks that begin to focus on what is wrong now on the north side of Main Street for their sidewalks. They're in bad shape. That's what brought me to this discussion a while back. That's what has encouraged me to keep involved. And I think that if you begin to take these and reduce them to a manageable level, you can start making progress that, as you pointed out, people can see and know you're doing something while the bigger projects are going on. And the start point is, I think, a working group dealing with sidewalks, and I think part of that is funding. You've heard about the $250,000 that's sort of there. There's $130 in the capital fund. It's not quite sure what it can be used for, but probably it can be used for Main Street, north side sidewalks that need repair. You've got $120,000 in the department's coffers, presumably. Verify that is there. As I heard it tonight, I guess it can only be used on one end. But the selectmen and budget committee or someone put together a capital plan some time ago, a year or two ago, that divided this project on the north side of Main Street into three pieces. It put down in their capital plan that each piece was allocated $165,000. That's an estimate, obviously. But if you put those three together, that's $500,000. If you've only got 120, you're going to need $500,000 just to do that project. You need to start now. The budget committee process starts in September. That's going to be your next meeting. That is going to be done by December. I think it's very important that this committee understand that to work for something next year, you have to start putting stuff together now to get the money there. I would strongly encourage you to look at what you need in the capital fund this year to be able to next year do 1/3 of that project, which is presumably about $165,000. The water project, you're not supposed to start until the project is completed for a year. If you started at the Cleveland Homestead end and moved down this direction, all the way down to Squires Lane is not affected by that water project. You can do something with it. It is a bad sidewalk. You heard Bob talk about it. It's a bad sidewalk. This is not new sidewalks. This is existing sidewalks. I think, one, start looking at what you need for money. Ask the town for it in the capital plan. Then start planning and projecting for a 3-step process of all of Main Street. Start on the end that you can do and start this year. In your agenda, you're talking about starting in '26. I think that would be very important for this town to see that we're actually moving forward in '25. You can do it in '25 if you've got the money and the project's done, or even stop at Squires Lane, but start doing something and making it obvious to people that it's being done. I would love to see that happen. Ed has pointed out that there are other sidewalks in town for that matter. It has never been, we haven't spent money, I think, in 7 or 8 years on sidewalks. There are other sidewalks between Main Street. One was mentioned by Ed, and if you go walk on it and look at it, it needs some work. There may be others. But step one, I think, is a working committee says, we need X amount of money to do the north-south of Main Street. We would like to do it in a 3-year term. We would like to do one next year, 2025, followed by 2026, followed by 2027. If that plan is in place and you start doing it, you then have another couple of years to say, all right, what other existing sidewalks need to be looked at and taken care of before you start looking at new sidewalks, which is, again, as Bob pointed out, a very expensive project when you start figuring out not just the cost of it, but maintenance of it, et cetera. But I would love to see this committee become an action committee, not an advisory committee, and push for getting things done. I would love to see bike routes. I would love to be able to take my bike out. I'm afraid to. It's Main Street dangerous. But my concern is sidewalks, existing sidewalks, and then future sidewalks. The other thing you want to think about is there's a tendency, and maybe it's the right one, to say our Department of Public Works can do the work, and they're going to do it with asphalt. Well, maybe. But maybe the committee should look at other things. There are pavers, there are permeable pavers that you can put down, and they have cuts in them so water leaks directly below instead of running off. Those, I've seen those in towns, and they look very, very nice. There's brick. I'm not so fond of brick because the weeds grow up in them. But if you go up to Kennebuck, Maine, beautiful brick walks. Concrete lasts longer than asphalt, but it's more environmentally disadvantageous. It has more CO2 in the manufacturing process. So I would like you to look at, a plan, ask for money, start the plan, look at the surface, look at whether our department can do it, whether it should be some kind of a different surface, what would be involved in that. Concrete lasts longer, asphalt needs more repair. But there are a lot of things about this. But if you start at a level of just north side of Main Street, get that plan, that funding, that decision-making in place, start the process. I would love to see it this following year. Love to see. You then got a plan in place that eats up 3 years of financing and work while you turn your attention to the bike routes, new sidewalks, things like that. I would love to see a sidewalk down County Road, but as one of you pointed out, I advocated at the planning board both for the Twin Pines project and the Continuum project to have them put a sidewalk in from the Rotary down to Continuum, because you can then sneak into their private sidewalks and walk down to where the sidewalk's going to be extended on Parkside. I would also love to see Parkside extended so you can get down to the Knights Hill Park. There are all kinds of things. County Road is too narrow, there's all kinds of things. You may end up having to look at not eminent domain, folks, but easements, permissions. Go to somebody. The stone wall's in the wrong place. You don't take it by eminent domain. You say, can we move the stone wall 2 feet in? The other thing you want to look at is, I think ADA only requires 3 feet, but most of our sidewalks in this town are 5 feet. There are sidewalks in other towns that are 7.5 feet that are bike walk. And you have signs up, bike walk. If you're a real biker, you don't want those because you got to go real slow. So I don't think that's going to work in this town, but that's something that's out there. But you need to look at 5 feet wide sidewalks. We've got them, just continue them, and see where you have to do some additional work on it. So I will leave you alone because you got a lot on your plate, but I wanted to say my piece. North side.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. And I think Bob's point is, you know, we do have to have a focus point. We do have to have sort of a North Star. We have to figure out, in addition to other projects that may be primary or secondary, the catalyst for a lot of this discussion was the condition of the sidewalks on Main Street. We can't lose sight of that. That has to be at the core of what we do, and we have to be an advocate. We have to be a facilitator for the town actually investing the money, a portion of which has already been allocated. So I appreciate that. Any other public comment this evening? I think at this juncture, I will call for adjournment. Could I have a second? And our next meeting will be September 19th at 5 p.m. I appreciate all of your participation this evening, and thank you for your time and attention.